So I didn't have like a spouse to talk to most nights. I would say he was home 3 to 4 nights a month, that he was home like before I went to sleep, if he was home. And so they were like starting their residency rules then, but they didn't really enforce them with like the 80-hour work week. So it was usually like 120 plus hours. And so he was mostly gone for the first 3.5 years of really the first 12 years. I will say his stroke diagnosis was prolonged and advanced sleep deprivation.
Really?
So like he really did have a stroke with advanced sleep deprivation. So
You're going to love today's guest, Tiffany Rosenhan, a best-selling author whose stories are thrilling, emotional, and so deeply human. We talk about friendship, womanhood, and why the most powerful stories in fiction and in real life are born out of our hardest moments. Tiffany also shares some of her own defining experience and what it means to find light in the middle of loss. This one is all about women supporting women, the power of our voices, and the beauty of living a story worth telling. All right, Tiffany, welcome to the show.
thank you for having me, Lizzy. Happy to be here.
So excited to talk about your life's journey, where you are right now, and how you've made the impact that you have made. But let's just start out. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, well, I am Tiffany Rosenhan. I have 4 daughters. I'm in that phase where they're growing up. My 2 oldest left for college this year, and I've got 2 at home still. I'm also an identical twin. And I always start with that because it's formulated and shaped my entire experience. And I tend to speak in the plural. And I think the really beautiful thing about being an identical twin is one thing I've noticed in my life is we're able to explore the world, and we're able to explore things when you have a best friend that's always cheering you on and you have someone that always has your back. I think I've always felt a security in trying new things and in going new places because I have this amazing twin sister. So I feel as though it's important because it's central to my identity is being an identical twin.
So I have identical girl twins.
No, you don't.
I do.
What? I did not know
they're
that.
12.
Oh my gosh, that is
Yes.
so fun. Okay, so you know exactly what I'm
It's
talking
the best.
about.
It's the best. Truly.
It's incredible.
And my grandpa was actually an identical twin as well.
No way.
Which, what I've heard, correct me now
Yeah.
if we're wrong, when I found out we were having twins, I was like, they always say like identical twins skip a generation, and the doctor was like, oh no, they're just a mutation. There's like no genetic component at all.
Just a mutation.
Is that what you have
That's
heard?
what I was always told.
Okay,
but
I
I
think
do
the
know
science is
friends.
real.
I knew have identical twins that have identical twins, which I think is so
Really?
strange. Yeah. So
We might see if we have to debunk that. We'll
I
get
know.
back to you guys on that
I'd
later.
be curious to know. And at least Kathy, my business partner, is also an identical twin, and her mom is an identical twin.
Oh, I didn't realize.
Yeah. Yeah. So identical twins totally run. I mean, they say they don't run in the
We're gonna
family,
have
but
to- we're going to look deeper.
I think we should.
But it was always special growing up. And then like, I actually always thought like, I might be someone who has twins. So then when we found out we were having twins, I was just like,
The best
it felt
thing
so
ever.
lucky. Yeah. It's like rolling sixes. Like,
Yeah,
you know, it's
totally.
like, I'm the lucky one. I won the lottery.
I know.
Oh,
Well, I
that's so
always
great.
say I feel so bad for everyone who's not a twin because it really is the best thing ever. It's just like, I don't know any different, of course, but I think it's the greatest gift anyone could have.
So great. So I love to start these episodes, and maybe the twin story is a part of this, by asking the question for women thinking about this: how can we mentor other women?
Yeah.
How did you get the confidence and find the courage to find your voice? What was the journey like for you?
That's such a great question. I would say being an identical twin who's shaped kind of by being a twin. Our name was twin. We were always the Logan twins. I think as you enter adulthood and you begin to form your own identity, it's a little more, you're dealing with a little more as a twin because you're understanding what it's like to be an independent individual, which might sound strange, but when you're used to being 2 halves of a whole, it's weird to be a whole. And so I think in my early 20s, I had young children really early. And I found myself, I was living in Kentucky, actually. My husband was in residency, and I had 2 kids there. And I was 20 years old when I graduated from the U with a degree in political science and history, and kind of thought I would go into the Foreign Service or get a PhD or something. And we were pregnant. And so I thought, I'm going to have kids now, and I'll do the career later, I guess was my thought. And I did. And I found myself with these young children, and I began to write stories when they were sleeping. And I loved writing stories and crafting stories. And I think writing stories is how I began to process and understand myself. Because when we write stories about others, we began to reflect that on our own experiences, which I can get to later. But storytelling to me is just this conduit to my own understanding myself. And I would say that throughout my 20s, I had 4 young children, and then I stayed home with them for a long time. And I think we can get into my writing career later too, but basically when I was 34, is that right? When I was 34, in fact, I am going to get to it now. So I wrote for fun for years, and I was really hesitant to pursue a career in writing because my husband's career was incredibly busy, And he was a critical care physician, but he also ran several practices and had some medical device startups he was running as well. And so he was doing the startups in the day, ICU shifts at night, and it was around the clock. And I thought one of us has to be home. So my identity was really woven into mothering for 14 years, you could say. And I said, I'm not ready to pursue it. And then my girls aged. I said, I'm going to look for an agent. So I got an agent, my first agent, literary agent, to sell my book. And I was still a little nervous. And I took my girls to school. And on the drive home from picking all four of my girls up from school from the first day of all-day school, I got a phone call from my agent with the offer from Bloomsbury.
Oh, wow.
I needed a
That
lightning
is not.
strike.
That is a lightning strike. And
I
from what I've
needed
heard from authors,
a lightning strike.
that's not typical.
And so I got a phone call, and I just could not believe that it happened on the day that I picked up all my girls from school. It just didn't seem like it was anything but divine. And I feel like it was God saying, it's okay to pursue this part of your life now. And I thought to myself, okay, my youngest she was actually in junior kindergarten, which is preschool, but it was all day. So to me, it was kind of the equivalent with timing. All four of my girls were gone all day. And I thought, I can write. I can pursue this career, whatever it may be. And I dove into it. I began writing the sequel. I worked on the first book, and I was excited for this next phase with my kids in school and all this time. And then in February, my husband had a hemorrhagic stroke, and it was changed everything. It was a huge brain injury, and hemorrhagic means like you have a giant clot in your brain. So it's the equivalent. Your recovery process is more similar to a traumatic brain injury than a typical stroke patient. But he had brain surgery and then a really complex, long recovery for several years. And so I kind of paused writing to be a caregiver, and he had to relearn how to read and write and talk. And he couldn't drive as he developed epilepsy for a few years. I will cut to the chase and say he's had a really fantastic recovery. Certain things are still really hard, but it was a very long 3 years, a really intense recovery. And so
Is he able to practice?
Pardon?
Is he able to practice again?
He
now?
does not do ICU care. Okay. So he had some medical device companies that he built, and continued. So he's now does healthcare venture because of his device companies, but he does not practice medicine anymore. The second ICU care is very intense, and there's no margin of error. And one of his biggest symptoms was expressive aphasia, which means you mess up numbers. So as he relearned how to speak, he would say 4, and he means 4,000, but he can only say 4. So obviously, as a critical care doctor, you can't be like, hey, give him 4 liters of blood. And they're like, you mean 4/10 of a liter? Or whatever it is. So he knew at that point he would never practice medicine again.
Wow.
Which
So
is
that
a huge
completely changed everything.
Yeah. So, I mean, I was 34, I had 4 young kids, and my life transformed overnight. And it was incredibly hard to be married to someone who changed so much, because brain injuries change people. And so becoming a caregiver, having 4 young kids, I will give full credit. I had incredible support. And I think, and I believed then as I do now, and this is like a core theme in my life, is when I think of the most sacred spiritual experiences in my life, they've happened alongside the most tragic and terrifying. And I don't know why they happen at this simultaneously, but they tend to collide. And I think of every experience that I would rank as top spiritual experience, and they happen among the hardest. So I think that's also an incredible gift we have to see the good in those circumstances. But to get back to your original point, I was a caregiver, cared for my husband. He's made a miraculous recovery. But in the interim, I developed, I would say, confidence as an independent individual. And I approached my friend Elise Caffey about starting a publishing company together. And we started a publishing company, and we've published quite a few books since then. And I would say the understanding my identity, I think, shifted immensely when I had to become a caregiver and the sole parent for a while. And my entire identity just had a seismic shift, because when your spouse is suddenly disabled, it shifts your whole perspective. And I'm incredibly fortunate that he has healed, and he's incredible. And I cannot even consider the amount of discipline it took from his end to heal and rewire his brain and relearn everything. I mean, he's a fully functioning critical care physician that loses his ability to speak. And that's incredibly traumatic for him. And he really rebuilt his whole brain. And that's something I feel so strongly about with writing. We can learn new things. And what I observed with him, and this is kind of part of why I fell into mentoring other writers and creative storytellers, is we limit ourselves to the direction that we see. And when I watched him rebuild his brain, you think of it as his hemorrhagic stroke. I mean, he had a big, like, imagine like a baseball size hole in your head. I don't quite have the science, but that's kind of how I picture it. You can't go through it anymore. You have to go around it. So everything he's learned since was built with new neural pathway systems. And he did that just through effort. And so watching someone, and this is another like thing I've observed, is watching someone rise to the occasion and really be strong enough to commit to transforming themselves is like an incredible, rewarding experience. And I just believe we're all capable of that transformation. And that's one of the reasons I love working with authors, is watching them transform their words into something that's shareable and that they can transform their own stories. And without being cliche, we are the masters of our stories. We are the tellers of our stories. And I think we're only limited by our fear that maybe we're going to fail. And I choose to be optimistic. I am an inherently optimistic person.
So I right about this moment, I feel like when you're watching someone translate from one language to another, and then the person who was translating is like, wait, there was so much good things you just said.
You should have stopped
This
me.
is nothing and that you need to be sorry about. It's just, you just dropped so much wisdom that I'm like, oh, I want to dig in there. I want to dig in there. I want to dig in there.
I can go back.
We're just going to unpack some of this stuff because, again, I love telling women's stories. I love giving a microphone to women because I didn't hear these stories growing up, not from authors and from no one else either, right? It's like, what does it look like to find your voice? And what does it look like to know when you hit that gold mine and there's like, ooh, this is me. This is what I'm good at. This is what I'm here for. And then how do you navigate that when tragedy strikes and when the unthinkable happens? And what do you do? How can you recognize when you're being prepared for things? And you've just hit on so many of these things. I'm like, okay, we hit the gold mine, Tiffany. We hit the gold mine. I actually want to, my first question is actually when you started writing when your kids were little.
Yeah.
So you did political science, and what was the other?
History
and political science.
Yeah.
Did you already know you liked writing? Was that already a part of it, or that was totally out of the blue?
I would call myself an accidental author, which is kind of funny because I always loved reading. I was a huge reader, and I was a writer, but I wrote, and poli sci, you write a ton of just like thought processes and you're evaluating ideas, and it's more philosophical writing or very practical, like tedious. How does this policy affect and impact certain communities? Like and I did a minor in international relations, so I always loved like global strategy, geopolitical discussions. Like that was always very interesting to me. So everything I did was based in like the nonfiction, and I loved writing that, but I never explored fiction until my girls were home, and I found myself with these young children. They were all super colicky and cried all the time and had tons of night terrors. And retrospectively, I'm like, how did I do that? And it's like, I was just young, and they would be awake all night, so I would just be up writing all night. And I think my body could take that because I was so young, and my husband was gone. So I didn't have like a spouse to talk to most nights. I would say he was home 3 to 4 nights a month, that he was home like before I went to sleep, if he was home. And so they were like starting the residency rules then, but they didn't really enforce them with like the 80-hour work week. So it was usually like 120 plus hours. And so he was mostly gone for the first 3.5 years of really the first 12 years. I will say his stroke diagnosis was prolonged and advanced sleep deprivation.
Really?
So like he really did have a stroke with advanced sleep deprivation. So that's a real thing.
Wow.
That's the cause. People always ask, so I'll just cut to the chase. But I started writing because I just fell in love with creating stories. I fell in love with the process of writing. And one thing I always share with writers or young writers is understanding the distinction between writing and storytelling. Writing is something we do for ourselves. Storytelling is something we do for others. And I think so many writers get discouraged because they sit down and they want to tell the story before they've written the story. And I think you first have to write your story, and then you can tell the story. And writing is so valuable, whether you keep it to yourself or share it with others. That's when there are no rules. That's when you write indefinitely about all the crazy, chaotic thoughts you have. And storytelling is when you begin to follow patterns and rules and structure and transform scenes. And there's a difference. And I think one of the biggest hurdles young writers face, or even adult writers, is expecting to be a storyteller before they've written and before they become a writer.
Okay, can we just liken this to the girl listening in who was like, I want to change the world and I want to make impact, but they haven't written their own story yet.
Exactly.
And they're like here in like middle school or high school or college, and it's like, but my heart is for to share with women.
Right.
And it's like, then God will use that hurt.
Yeah.
But don't you worry. You'll have a chance to write your story first.
Yeah, I love that.
And then you'll get to tell this story that will make sense and that will resonate and will impact. But don't try to hurry it too fast.
Don't hurry.
Process a little. And I've shared this a lot on the podcast, actually. Writing is a big part of my story, not storytelling. I'm actually always working on storytelling.
That's okay. You're doing a great job.
But the writing of my own story and actually I took a full year. I had a blog and a Christian meditation app, and I stepped away from it completely. And for one full year, did 3 daily pages, The Artist's Way. I don't know if you've read that book. That's what she recommends. And then like weekly, you go on a little artist date where you're like, go do something that just lights you up, and it can be small and cheap and free, right? But after a year, I knew myself.
I love that.
Something totally shifted. But I think when you see women online or you're comparing yourself with other women's stories, you feel like there's some race for the story. But it may be that your story doesn't actually ever happen if you've rushed the writing and if you've rushed the process so that nothing ever unfolded. So, woo, I love that. I had never heard about
Well, I kind of made it up, so I don't know. Maybe it's not real.
Well, no, it is real. I think you're just like, we don't hear from a lot of authors either. We hear often the stories they tell and less about that process. So, ooh, beautiful takeaway.
So I loved writing. And so I thought I was fortunate to get a book contract. And of course, my life circumstances shifted from the book sequel, which I'm still writing. People always ask.
Really?
So hopefully I have some exciting news to share soon. But I fell into publishing as well. And that's storytelling. But I think what's so important to me is when I look back at my early years of mothering and having young kids and all the demands, I loved it. I kind of felt like I was playing house for years. I had 4 girls. They were so fun to dress up. They were, of course, high maintenance with crying and tears, but for the most part, we just had a lot of fun, and they tend to all like the things I like. We loved craft projects and traveling, and they were pretty good sports, but it's hard when you, I hear the term also like single parenting in a marriage. That was really me for the first 12, 14 years because my husband was virtually absent. So when he had a stroke, we had to rebuild as a family unit because we had spent very little time together as a unit of 6. It mostly been the 5 of us and then him kind of fluttering in and out. And so rebuilding that halfway into a marriage is a really special experience.
Special in what way?
I think it's uniquely bonding. I think when you go through hard things together, you bond. And when you see the best in people among the hard, you bond even more. And so I think that's really special to see someone overcome the hardest thing that most people will go through is losing your ability to communicate, and watching them commit to transforming and rebuilding and reworking their wiring systems is just, it's cool. I love watching people just become the best version of themselves. And I think with writing and storytelling, I look at every story as having potential. And the goal is not to come with a perfect story. The goal is to come with like just a huge jumbled mess of words on a page, and then we transform it together. And I think that's life and our friends and those we love. We help each other transform. And I like to surround myself with people who I think see the best in other people. And I found my closest friends are all people I would consider look at others and see the best in them and see their potential. And I think I've always been just an optimistic person, and I guess just believer in the beauty of who we can become.
Well, perfect thing for an author to have that perspective. Can we talk about friendship for just a minute?
Yeah, of course.
I think this is also a topic for women that some people it comes easily to, or maybe they've seen it modeled. For a lot of women, it doesn't.
Yeah.
The statistics are that most women feel outside of the circle and not directly inside of the circle.
Yeah.
What has worked for you? You mentioned that friendships play a role in your life. Has that always been that way? I mean, you grew up with a built-in friend.
I did, of course.
But just thinking more broadly, how did that progress in your life?
That's a great question. I would say we moved around often as kids, almost every year or two in a different school. Like our family dynamics were constantly shifting, lots of new dynamics. And so I was exposed to a lot of new and change throughout my entire life, which made me very curious about people that I hadn't yet met and eager to get to know them rather than being afraid of reaching out. I also think the value of being a twin, this is why I always preface with that, because I don't want to say that moving around often or making new friends often is is easy or I recommend it necessarily, but because I was a twin, I had the value and the benefit of being able to introduce myself and make new friends without the disadvantage and the harm that can come with feeling alone in those circumstances. So I got the best of both worlds because I had the experience of being constantly shuffled around and meeting new people and going to new schools without the harm that can come with being isolated as a youth. So I would say for me, it's having the strategies out. My older sister, Chelsea, who I think is so wise, when we started high school, she says, when you see people, just smile at them. And I thought that was such a funny thing to say at the time, but she was right. I would say when I meet people, I always first try to remember their name. People love being called by their name. And even if you forget it, I just say, I'm so sorry. I know you. I'm blanking on your name. Please remind me. Because I've noticed if I don't ask that, then I'm unable to have a conversation because I'm so afraid that they're going to know that I don't know their name.
Yep.
And I've just learned to get over it because I used to be a person that remembered people's names. Now I don't. And it's really alarming to be like, am I getting old? I am getting old, but I'm forgetting people's names. So now but I refuse to let that limit me. And I would say with friendships, you get in what you put out. I have tried so hard, and I still try every single day to be a friend. I have the same friends since high school that I've had my whole
Really?
life. Yeah. We went on a birthday hike yesterday. We were saying 26 or 27 years we've been friends, but I also have a lot of new friends. And I have friends that I've made in this past year that are incredibly valuable to me and I love and adore. And I don't think there's a limit to friendships. I think there's a limit to who you can confide in necessarily and share personal information with. But I think understanding that we can have deep, deep friendships and we can also have really healthy acquaintances, and that's okay too. And I would say friendship to me is loyalty and it's empathy and it's putting in an effort. I think those three things have enabled me. I call my friends all the time. I will say that they probably, in fact, my sister-in-law, I won't say who, said to me, Tiffany, every time you call me, I'm like, oh, what's wrong? And I'm like, I'm so sorry. I probably called a dozen people a day. And I'm sure I put them all in a heart attack that are not used to my phone calls. But I'm a caller. I like talking to people. I like hearing their voice. I like checking in. I've talked to my sister-in-law every single day since I was 20 years old because when I had a brand new baby in Kentucky and I was on Kentucky time and I'd be up at like 3 a.m, it would be midnight and she'd be putting her kids to bed. And I would call her and she'd talk to me because I was so lonely. But I've called my friends all the time. I check in with them and I try to be a good friend and support them. I don't know that I have good advice on like maintaining friendships other than just be a loyal person. I think loyalty is immense and be empathetic. So often we judge each other. And I think what I've observed is women who have gone through really hard things have an inherent empathy about them. Yeah. And that's who I tend to gravitate toward. I think we are just all trying our best. I've never met, in fact, I can't even think of a person I met that's not trying their best within the experience they have and their limitations. A lot of people, what I've also observed is most unkind behavior by women is driven by insecurity or some other mental health condition. But insecurity and or jealousy. Mm-hmm. Those seem to be the driving forces.
Which is typically just pain.
Pain.
It's coming from a place of immense pain.
Yep.
And they're doing their best trying to figure out.
Yeah.
I mean, I even think about my social media.
Yeah.
And when I just get like rude comments and off the wall comments and really unkind comments or really angry reviews. I have a couple of reviews even on my podcast that I'm just like, I am just not that divisive of a person.
I know.
And
it's just anger.
It's just anger. But then often if it's a really bad one that I notice that I'm like, ooh, that one actually stung. Often if I go and look at their profile, almost without exception, they have very few people following them. Yeah. And they're following a ton of people. Yep. They may have no posts. So in their life, there's no sharing happening and very few people who are looking in and checking in on them and people that they're constantly looking in on their lives.
I love that. Yeah.
And I think, well, of course, that's a recipe for feeling angry.
Mm-hmm.
We need to have the reverse where we have so much more that we're giving and we're putting out to the world and we're like constantly iterating and very little that we're looking in on and judging and saying, well, why are you saying that? And why are you doing that? That doesn't work.
It doesn't work. And you have to be someone, if you want to be invited, you typically have to invite. And that's hard too. And it's hard to put yourselves out there. And that's why I'm fortunate that my twin sister is the most outgoing person in the entire world. So she always was really good at that, but I followed her example. I like to think I have. But I think friendships just take so much effort. And it's so hard as women when we're torn in so many different directions. Yeah. But I am shocked how certain friendships I have maintained over so many years and so many struggles by simply talking on the phone for 5 minutes every few weeks or every few days or once a month or whatever. It's amazing what that physical conversation does for our souls. And if I could encourage women to do one thing, I would say talk to your friends over the phone because it's an old habit. And maybe it's because I was born in 1985, but nothing fills my cup more than just like if my friend texts me, I'll call them back and be like, well, hi, how are you? What do you want to do about this random donut pickup you want me to do somewhere? Like, what is this thing? What's it for? how are things going? And just having a verbal check-in, I think matters to each of us. We each want to feel seen and heard. And a simple like a DM or a text can absolutely work for certain stuff, texting here and there. But when you're problem solving, when you're trying to find a solution to something, just talk on the phone. If you can talk in person, of course, talk in person. But I definitely think it just takes so much effort as women to maintain friendships because we are torn in so many different ways. So when I'm busy, I just try to call on the phone because that's when I have 4 teenage girls, it's busy. One of them lived abroad the last few years playing tennis. So I was going abroad a lot. I was taking all my girls abroad a lot. That's busy in a way because you're kind of shuffled around, you're down different time zones. And so I really wasn't able to be there physically for a lot of friend things. All my friends are doing stuff without me together. So I just would call and check in. And I feel like I'm a part of it. And I'm happy that they're happy. There's not this, I don't know how to call it. You can't feel envious when other people are doing things. I just think you just have to tell ourselves, we can't feel that way. It's not fair. It's not fair to us. It only hurts us. And I was blessed with a mother who, when someone would say something mean, she would say, don't you feel sad for them? So she always put the impetus on the person that's being unkind, pray for, feel sad for them. Like typically there's something far harder beneath the surface that's driving that behavior. It's not about us. Like it's almost never about us.
Yep.
Like I think it's rarely about the recipient of the unkind words. Of course there's drama and that's not always true, but for the most part, it's about the person's sadness.
Are you intentional about, like, you have the acquaintances, then you have the deep friends, obviously some for decades, which is so amazing. I think that is really, really rare.
I'm very lucky.
They
tolerate me, I think. Just kidding.
Going from acquaintance to a deeper friend, are you intentional about how you go about that? If and when you do it, are you still in that phase?
I would say certain friendships have been forged through like hardship together, going through something hard together, working with someone. And we can, Elise is a good example of one of the reasons we'd been friends for years before we started a publishing company. But one of the things that really bound us together was working on something together. When you build something together, you see the best in other people. I suppose you could also see the worst, but I saw the best. And I think when you do things together, you just forge loyalty, but there's the follow-up. It's so easy to have like a girls camp friendship where you go for the summer and you make friends and then you never see them again. I have friends on Instagram that I went to grade school with back in Ohio, like in Illinois. And we just kind of, like touch base on Instagram or whatever. But like, I think these people shape who you are and they shape our own stories. And so I don't feel like abandoning people. Like I don't like to collect tokens. Like I value our relationship. And truthfully, when you've been in an experience where you need the people around you, you realize that I read this quote that I think is so wise, to be in a village, you have to be a villager. And I think just understanding how valuable it is to have people that will step in and support your family when you need it is invaluable. And maybe once you've experienced that, you understand that that's not something I'm going to compromise. I've needed my village too many times to risk not being a good member of my community because I've needed them over and over again. And they've, the adults who have been mentors to my girls as they've struggled through things, and, all of those figures in my own friends who are mentors to my girls and who will cheer them up, and who, my oldest daughter who's struggling a lot with she had a lot of surgeries as she was playing tennis, and like one of our friends who's also a really great tennis player would like take her to play in the mornings, and he would just basically build her up emotionally. Like that was incredible. Like he was the person that she would be like, I know you can beat me and that's okay, but we're going to have fun. And it was like such a good mentor for her. And I think that was because we've been friends for years, and he knew what our family needed, and he knew how to step in and be a good friend to us by helping with our one daughter who was struggling emotionally with all the surgeries and recovering from these things playing tennis. And so I think I just have noticed it takes a lot of effort to maintain friendships. And we just have to choose that matters, because it's easy to think it doesn't, that we're good on our own, but I don't want to live my life alone. I don't want to be alone. I don't want to have to solve my problems alone. I want to be part of a community that rallies around each other, because that's what, in the midst of crisis, that's what I've craved. I haven't craved isolation when I've been sad. Like, sorry.
Take your time.
On the night I found out Elise died, I called my sister and my other friend, We drove over to Lisa's neighborhood where my really good friend lives, another good friend. And I had to tell her, and there was 6 of us together on the porch crying, and like in a group. I say we collapsed together in our grief. And I knew in that moment I needed to be surrounded by my friends. And that was a moment I'll never forget. And the next day, I might need like a bigger, stronger minute. The day after Elise passed away, I just remember being on my couch in my robe, crying. And I had like so many friends just come check on me. And, I think how lonely I would have felt had I not built those friendships over years. And I don't think I deserved their friendship, but I know I've tried to be a good friend. And I don't think I deserve all this love and support. Like, I'm entitled to it, but I like to think that I've been there for them when they've needed me, and there's reciprocity. And they knew that because I'd seen them, they'd allowed me to see them at their hardest moments. They knew that I would let them see me at my hardest moments. And it's so easy to think we have everything put together. And the truth is, at 34 years old, my husband has a stroke. I was like, well, turns out I have nothing together. I don't have this figured out in any way, shape, or form. And you're incredibly vulnerable in that position. Like, I've never felt more vulnerable in my life than almost losing my spouse and not knowing if he was ever going to live, and 2, how different he would be when he lived, if he lived. And so that's an incredible vulnerable experience where you're kind of like, God takes over and you just say, come what may, I'll figure it out. And after Elise passed, I was surrounded by so much love. And I think part of that was my friends knew that I was humble enough to accept all of the compassion because I needed it. I still do.
I'm going to share a story. I did not grow up being good at friendship, and even still I would say I'm like probably a D if I'd grade myself as a friend. Oh no, it's true. And
well, I probably am too. I'm probably way too. Way too.
The fact that you can say this friend and then we went to this friend and this friend, like that is just the proof, right? Like, who would you say are your circle of friends? And a couple of years ago, I think I've shared this on the podcast because I had a friend on, Julia Nixon. I don't know if you know.
Oh yeah, I know Julia. She's fantastic.
She's the best. Lives next door, and something happens, and she knows, and I'm literally in my robe, like the hair's greasy. I'm sitting. My office is so messy. We'd moved into our house. It's so messy that I can't even sit at my desk at my office, like at my desk on my chair. And so I'm sitting on a little stool in the corner, just like doing the work I needed to do and doing what I had to do that day. But just truly like, I'm just so sad. Yeah. But I have not been at the crossroads of grief. I have not been in the places because I haven't ever seen people show up for me in that way. Yeah. And so I've been on the opposite end, and she showed up and she had a smoothie in her hand and she just came down and like, and where you're just like, I just might like smell. I'm like, I totally
haven't showered in 2 days. Yeah.
Awful, And she came in and she's like kneeling down on this little teeny IKEA stool. Yeah. Looking at me like, are you okay? Yeah. And it was like, wait, you're okay that I don't have to collect myself before I can show up the way that you'll accept me. Like, you accept me right now in this moment, right now. Yeah. And she did wholeheartedly, fully. And she still is maybe one of the only people I'm like, you can walk into my house at any time because I know you like love me. And I know you see me and you're not going to judge me. And like part of my quest to be a better friend is like, how do I be the kind of friend who has the courage to walk in on those moments, knowing that I, at least maybe after you tell me if I have enough practice, maybe I'll know what to say, but like not even knowing that I know what to say, but like being in the most sacred of spaces and times, like those are maybe the holiest moments of life.
They are. I love that.
And building the skill. I love that you
Sounds like you're a good friend.
No, I'm not. I've seen a good friend now, and I know what I want to be like. And I'm starting to get a little bit of courage to show up in those moments. But like, I think of anything we do as women and men and humans on earth, maybe our highest calling is to be the kind of person that knows when those places are, that has the courage to show up and that just does it.
And I think it's incredibly difficult for women who are very high functioning. And I was especially like the stroke first, and then the grief with Elise was just you. You learn that you're incredibly capable. I can do hard things. I can do all the things. And one thing I've learned since Elise passed in the last 8 months is to separate the difference between can and should. I can do this. Should I? And I think sometimes we have so much going on. It's so easy to just do things ourselves or think we can handle things. And we might be able to, but should we? Because at what cost? And I think if we don't allow people, and as hard as it is, to serve us, I remember that was the first time I'd ever had accepted a meal was after the stroke. And I'll tell you why, because my twin sister took all 4 of my girls as I was kind of coming out of the hospital. She took all 4 of my girls to live with her for about 6 weeks. Really? So my girls, so they lived with my sister's house. She's next door and I had other friends that stepped in and did, brought over lunches and dishes. And then, so my sister's like, yeah, of course everyone can bring meals. I've got 8 little kids to feed suddenly. But it was kind of the first time I'd accepted that. And it is so difficult and humbling to be served, quote, and yet when we allow others to serve us, they then allow us to serve them. And I think that's really bonding and a really sacred experience to be vulnerable enough to say, yes, I can cook my family dinner, but because you brought it to me, I can instead sit and read with my daughter who needs my attention. And that's okay too. And it's not humiliating. I always was like, what if people come in and they think I can't do this myself? Of course I can do it. I figured everything else out by myself. I can do this. What if they think I can't? Are they doing this because I think I can't? And it's like, no, them serving me doesn't mean I'm not capable of taking care of myself. It's a way for us to show love. And I think you have to be vulnerable, and it's hard, but I think a lot of beauty comes from those friendships that have been forged through these really hard experiences. So
that's what we're here for.
Yeah.
If not that,
and I'm grateful.
what?
I'm incredibly, incredibly blessed to have amazing friends. But I also think I seek out women who are kind. I like to think I seek out women who are loyal and women who are empathetic and who don't think the worst every time something bad happens. I like to surround myself with optimistic people. That's just because that's how I roll. I choose to see the best, and I choose to look for miracles, and I choose to see the potential in people. And I would say that's a gift that comes naturally to me. Other things are much harder, like organization and anything important. But seeing the best in people tends to come pretty easy for me.
So I love thinking of all the wisdom you've dropped here today.
Oh, I don't know if it's wisdom.
Oh, so much. If you can't see it, I can. Don't worry. But then thinking about now what you do as a publisher. And for those
I love that.
who don't know, you own a publishing company.
Yep.
And for those who aren't familiar with the story with Elise, one of your good friends, maybe just share that and what happened just briefly. Because I know a lot of listeners will know, and this was a very public thing. Yeah. But I know there's also listeners that will be not sure what we're talking about.
Okay, so I published Girl from Nowhere with Bloomsbury, and my husband had a stroke, and it was COVID at the time when I published, 2020. And so I ended up speaking to a lot of students and mentoring a lot of authors, and I really fell in love with building a story from the ground up and kind of guiding other authors through that. And I began to think about, what if we had another option for publishing that's kind of in our own ecosystem outside of the New York, Manhattan experience, that's really driven around all these women I'm running into who seem to be a lot like me. Maybe they finished their education, but for the most part, they've stayed home for the last X amount of years, and now their kids are growing and they're eager to seek out what they want to do next. We have 50 years ahead of us, a lot of us. Mm-hmm. I looked at that and I just kept bumping on this idea of what if there's a different option? What if there's something we could do? So I had a good friend, Elise Caffey, who was a travel blogger and also an identical twin. And I said, Elise, do you want to write a children's book with me about these 2 identical twins that explore Europe together? And she's like, sure, that sounds fun. So we started working it for a few months. Simultaneously, I was still doing a lot of public speaking. I was doing a lot of writing consultations. And I just couldn't let this idea go that there was something there. Then I ran into a friend, Maria Lichty, she's a food blogger. And she told me she wanted to publish another book. And I said, I'll publish your book. And she's like, what? And I was like, I'll publish your next book. She's like, do you know how? And I'm like, no, but Elise does. No, I didn't know how, but so then I went to Elise, I called her and I said, Elise, what if instead of doing our children's book, we start a publishing company together? And she said, sure. And it's my favorite story because that answer reflects Elise's whole perspective, which was she was a champion of women and she constantly believed that other women could rise to the occasion. I did not have all the experience in the world. I never pretended I did, but she saw that I could learn, and together we could create something really spectacular. So I said, Elise, let's start a publishing company. And we started a publishing company in 2022. I'd have to go back and look, somewhere around there. And we quickly published several books. And we'd been working on quite a few books, but 3 of them had published. And we just signed a book with Abby Cox, First Lady Abby Cox. We're doing her children's picture book in the spring. We had signed a book with her as our 8th book. And a week later, she was in a tragic accident and passed away. And that was another far bigger, to be honest, no offense to my husband, a far bigger seismic shift in my life. Because,
Really?
yeah, I think losing her was, one, she's an incredible person. We would joke that, like, you know, we kept getting messages after she passed of like all the things she had done the day before she died. And we're like, how is that possible? But it turns out it was. She was texting all of her friends, like, I hope you do great in this thing today, and good job on this, and thinking of you, wanted to just check in. Just all these things that she did to be a good friend. She was a very good friend. But she passed away, and I decided we still had 4 more books in production, so I was going to continue to get those to press. And so many women stepped in to support me, which is a miracle, it feels like, because Elise and I have always had very different roles in our publishing company. I do the creative development and the storytelling. I like to call it storytelling science. I love building out storyboards and understanding the flow of the characters and kind of like the quote unquote plot of a book. Even if it's a cookbook, you kind of want to know, why are we doing this? What's the purpose behind this? Who are you and why are you telling this story? There's always the first point, which is I want to do X book. And the second, and you can go infinite ways through this idea. It's like if you imagine one point and you go infinite ways. My job is to understand what the second point is. The second point is you as the author, why are you telling this story? Once we establish that point, then suddenly we have a line. And my job is to kind of guide the writer through that, over that line, I guess you could say, across the line. And so we looked at all of our stories and I thought, I'm going to continue to publish these. So I was really fortunate. Kristen Anders had her cookbook coming out about, I'd have to back just a few weeks after Elise passed away. And she hosted this incredible launch and a dinner. And we were able to kind of speak about Elise. And I said, it's not easy to celebrate with this tragedy, but it's very easy to celebrate Elise's work and what she committed to Jumal Press. And then I got our next 2 books to press, which have just come out this week, a children's picture book that we worked on together. The original one we started with was our 7th book. And it felt kind of like this, right before that we published a young adult novel, Promise Vengeance. So have this book coming out, Pip and Poppy's European Adventure. Hope you all look at a copy.
Yes, we'll make sure to link that.
Link
in the
that.
show
It'll be so
notes
fun. And it's the story that we originally started writing together. So having that here is just magic because I truly look back at this last 7 months and don't know how they're physically here. But I had incredible support from an incredible team. And again, women always rise to the occasion. That's what I've learned. It's irrefutable. Women will always figure things out. And I've just been fortunate to be in a position where I've had to do that a few times. And now I've learned I can. And more importantly, I've learned other women can. I think what a lot of women need is a cheerleader. And I need cheerleaders in my life. And I've been fortunate to have people I can call and say, I have this big meeting with this big important person. And they cheer me on. And they don't know anything about the meeting. They don't need to know the royalties or the structure or whatever is happening. They just know that their only job is to tell me I can do my best. Because all I can ever do is my best. And I think that all of our authors, I've so enjoyed working with each of them because each of them came with an idea and we transformed it into something that allows them to share who they are with the world in a variety of different ways. And if I could continue to help women share their stories, I would be delighted. And I hope to continue to do that, of course. But I think that's just been watching other women really transform through this process of writing a book together is really rewarding. And it's so fun to see them acknowledge their finished work. A book is still this old archaic thing, but it's pretty cool to see an author have their book for the first time. It's super rewarding. And I love them acknowledging, it's like so few things we do as women are tangible.
Yeah.
And there's so few successes that are like, this is a success. Like you have a law degree, you have a diploma. So few things are like that. So few things do you put your time to that you're like, and I have this to show for it. A book is like you put thousands of hours into it and you actually have something to say, look what I did. Look what my story is. And even if it's fiction, it's still part of who you are. So I've loved working with authors, and Gmail Press is this dear thing to me now because of this relationship with Elise. And of course, it's been incredibly challenging for so many reasons working without her. Her absence is woven into my day every day because I've been working on these books. We've been working on these books together, and I'm still working on our other books that we signed together. So it's of course hard, but I also think Elise taught me everything I know about publishing. And I felt from the very beginning that she was like, Tiffany, get over yourself and start working. Like, you don't have time to curl up into a ball, just keep going. And she was right. I did not have time to stop and grieve. Well, I did grieve a lot. I am grieving, but I didn't have time to stop. I just kept going. I took a week off, and then I just got back to work and focused on calling in all the favors and asking all my smart friends who are all way smarter than me for guidance and support. And there's a lot of technical things that we don't have to figure out, but for the most part, we just figured things out as a team, and I'm really grateful to have incredible, incredible women who I wish I could name all of them. Some might get embarrassed, so I won't, but an incredible women, Stephanie and Julie, who have just really stepped in to support me and help me navigate this.
What has been most exciting for you? You've talked about giving women this opportunity to see a finished product and seeing their work, which with what I do, it's the verbal.
Yeah, I love that.
You know, like leaving them with an episode that they can share with friends and family. And like, it is a point in time, and it's not necessarily a finished work, but helping women find their voice and tell a story is like such a core part of who I am. Is there anything else with Gmail Press that you would say like this, I found my voice here, or I love that?
I love shaping stories. Storytelling is kind of what I've always loved. And I think especially creative, but just storytelling in general is definitely my niche. It's what I love. It's what I do best. And it's where I hope to always be. And I love helping women shape their own stories. So I always say with creative writing, I tell students this, with creative writing, so I'll tell all the young listeners, each of us has different experiences and identities that kind of shape and define who we are and what our identity is. Different experiences that shape and define who we are and what our identity is. And we also have different interests and curiosities and kind of topics that intrigue and inspire and excite us. And creative writing, the magic with creative writing happens at the convergence point between those two things. This magic happens between I'm gonna have to start over. Sorry, do that again. Because I was adjusting to say to students. Okay.
Yep.
One thing I love about storytelling is kind of the process that unfolds as we start to shape our stories. So the magic with creative writing happens at this convergence point between who you are and what your unique experience has been and what your unique identity is and what your specific interests and curiosities are. We all have unique experiences that shape and define who we are and what our identity is. And we all have unique interests and topics that intrigue and inspire and excite us. And the magic with creative writing happens at the convergence point between those two. And I think for women, I would say I would swap out the word creative writing for purpose. I think our purpose as women happens at this convergence point between who we are and what our experiences have been and what we are uniquely interested and curious about. I think this is where the magic happens.
Yep.
And I think if we can find this point, we will find our purpose. And I think it's different for each of us, just like every single novel is different for every single writer. We could get the same writing prompt and we'd have vastly different novels. And I could give you the same names, the same ages of the kids. I could give you the same setting. Our novels would be totally different because our experiences have been entirely different. I could not tell you what it's like to be a teenager living or going to high school without my twin. I wouldn't know what it's like to not have a twin. Therefore, my whole identity was shaped by that experience. So I think for women, I think we're both in this position. I just turned 40. I think I cannot think of anything I want to do more than age. Like, what a gift to age. And the thing about having your dearest friend die before you turn 40 is it shifts everything into perspective. And I think how lucky I am to be 40. I wish I'd always been so excited about being 40 because something happens, and I don't know what it is, but it feels like this year for me has been a lot of change between Elise passing away, my business, and then my older daughters both graduating high school this year.
Not twins, away. Though.
They're not twins.
I had to ask that.
Sorry. My oldest is 18, and then my youngest, she graduated, she's 16. Okay. So she's young.
Graduated early.
Yeah.
Okay.
She's in pre-med. She wants to do neurosurgery. She's just very focused. And my oldest daughter is playing tennis in Minnesota. Okay. So they both left home. So that's a lot of transformation.
Change.
And I've had to really look, and suddenly I'm like, no one needs me. This is the strangest thing ever. Like, I can't even tell you how bizarre it is to be like, I am not being ask for things all day long. It's just weird. It's been 20 years, my entire adult life, because my oldest is almost 19, I had her when I was 21. So my entire adult life has been mothering, basically. And so I've watched just a lot of women my age who approach 40 or mid 40s and have just, it's like clarity, I guess is what I can describe it. And you shed all the insecurities of your youth, and you shed all the feelings of like, well, what if? And it turns to, well, why not? And I think, I don't know that it's ambition as much as confidence, because women do hard things all the time. This is just a different version of hard, and it's a more proactive. Running a publishing company is just a more proactive version of hard. I'm choosing the hard because I value what happens to communities when women make decisions. And I say, if we could have more women making decisions in our communities, they would transform. And I have a far bigger perspective on literacy and fiction, and the way it impacts literacy. So there's a far bigger reason, but I would say for me, just understanding that I can, maybe is the biggest shift with turning 40, is I can do this. Yes, I need a lot of help. Yes, I have a lot of guidance. Yes, I make 1,000 mistakes every single day. But ultimately, I love helping women shape their stories, and I hope to continue to do that. And I have a weird adrenaline rush every single time we get something new in for any of our books. I just love the whole process of transforming something from nothing into this great thing. And I look at women, and I think this is even true with the books. And I think I always use this phrase that I'm sure my daughters hate, but I think it's a good analogy. So I think of us as like carbon, and you picture black dust. And what happens to carbon when you apply pressure and heat? It's transformed into diamonds. And I think we all have that capacity to transform if we're willing to accept the heat and pressure. Like if we're willing to endure the hard, and we endure it with faith, and we endure it with the just I don't know how to say it, hope, optimism, we can be transformed. And I say storytelling follows patterns, because humans follow patterns, because God has patterns. And I look at all the people in our lives who we admire for overcoming the odds and achieving the impossible. All of those people, their heroic stories happen at the aftermath of struggle. And I think of, if we talk about film, and we think about the greatest moments in film history and the moments everyone loves. If you think about Frodo at the top of Mount Doom, and he's struggling and he can't make it up to destroy the ring, and Sam says, I can't carry it for you, but I can carry you. And he throws Frodo on his back and runs up the hill. That moment's euphoric because of the struggle that preceded it. And the moment in Harry Potter, the final movie, where Harry takes out the stone from the snitch in the forest, and the ghosts of his parents come to him, and he goes, will you stay with me? And she says, always. And I think that moment's special because of I don't know, I'm crying at that moment.
I'm crying right now too.
But that moment's so special because his struggle that he endured to get there. Yeah. And I think we're so afraid of being hurt. We're so afraid of challenges. And I've learned everything that's good about me now is because of these hard things I've experienced. And it's been a really hard 5 years. It's been a very intense 5 years, a lot of chaos, a lot of upheaval, living, back and forth abroad, and having my husband's stroke, and being a caretaker, and publishing a novel traditionally during COVID, and then starting a publishing company, building this whole company, and then losing my dearest friend and business partner who I dreamed this whole business with. It's a lot of change. And I think what I've learned is God allows us to rise to the occasions and encourages us to do so. And I don't believe there's ever like a reason for things, nor that we have to see the good in everything. I think sometimes bad things happen, and that's okay. But I think there's no doubt that the people I admire immensely have gone through very seemingly unendurable things. And people that choose hope and choose to be optimistic come out the other side. And I think one of the most beautiful things I've seen is people willing to be hopeful. And I always say Shackleton. I don't know if you're familiar with the Shackleton story. I went to this whole binge last winter, and it was super dark for a few weeks, and I read all about all the explorations of the Antarctic. And I look at Shackleton's story and how the reason it's resonated over 100 years is because to arrive 14 months after losing the ship and keep his crew alive, the reason that moment comes when he crosses South Georgia. If you're not familiar with the story, I don't want to tell the whole thing, but basically, it's been 14 months on the ice. He takes this miraculous journey to South Georgia Island, crosses the island in 3 days with no food or water, basically. It's his last chance of survival. And he arrives at the whaling station, and he goes, I am Shackleton of the Endurance. And the guy just doesn't even believe it because it's been 14 months and they thought the whole crew is dead. That story is relevant because of how hard it was to have hope in that situation. There's a reason we still tell that story, and because if we don't have hope, we have nothing. And I choose to be hopeful. I choose to see miracles. And I like to think that we're all in the middle of our story. And if we want to get that point in the end, where it's like the point where everyone cheers in the movie theater, or you read the book and you cry, that only happens when struggle precedes it. And characters have to go through hard things. Characters have to be challenged. The most interesting stories we all like are when the characters really struggle. And it's unfortunate, I guess, or maybe fortunate. It's hard to think, gosh, do we really have to struggle? But we do, and that's okay. And I want to teach my own children not to be afraid of challenges and not to be afraid of the unknown. If I could tell my girls one thing, it would be accept that bad things will happen, and our job is not to prevent bad things from happening. Our job is to develop the skills to endure the things that happen, because they will. And that's been my experience, and I'm still incredibly happy, and I have amazing friends and people that I adore and love, and it's easy to feel like bad things can happen at any point, because they can, but that can't control how we live our lives. So with Jumel Press and with everything I've learned the last 7 months, I would say, is when you ask for help, help will always come. I almost just quoted, "Help will always come to those for ask for help."
I was like,
Hogwarts.
another Harry Potter. I love you. I love you.
I just we watch them every October, so it's all in my head.
Oh, so fun. I can see why you write incredible stories and why you have the friends you do, because I just want to like bottle you up and put you on
you're nice.
in a little backpack and carry you
Likewise.
around with me everywhere I go. Truly, like,
You're very kind.
you talked about we need more of the voices of women, and like,
Yeah.
I hope so many people find this episode, because this is the voice of womanhood, optimistic and hopeful, and trials will come, and they are the best parts of our life, because they forge and form us to who we are meant to be.
Diamonds.
And you just took us on a beautiful journey and just painted the whole thing out. So thank you for joining us today, and thank you for giving so freely of the wisdom that's come so difficultly in your own life, and with trial and pain. And it's just been a true pleasure to have you on.
Likewise.
Where can people find you?
My website, tiffanyrosenhan.com and jumelpress.com. Those are kind of my two places. I am on Instagram. I just don't post all the time, but Tiffany Rosenhan.
We'll put that in the show notes.
Thank you.
I'm just so excited to follow what your journey continues to do and
Stay
who you
tuned.
continue to touch. Please. And like, let us know so I can share with our audience as well, because you're just someone who is endearing, and just having you on already, I feel endeared to and want to know what's
kind.
next. So keep us posted.
Well, thank you for giving me an opportunity to share, and I love what you're doing here. So thank you so much for inviting me.
If this conversation moved you, share it with a friend who would love it too. These kinds of stories remind us that we are not alone, that friendship, faith, and showing up for each other are what make life feel full and real. And if you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed wherever you listen to your podcasts. It's the easiest way to stay connected and make sure you don't miss a single episode. We've got some amazing guests and conversation coming your way, and I don't want you to miss one of them.